All right, hello and how you doing? And welcome back to another episode of Two Jagoffs. I am your host, Austin Cairns. And today on the podcast, ladies and gentlemen, I am joined by yet again a very special guest. Making his first appearance here on Two Jagoffs is a Pittsburgh legend. He has worked with both the Pirates and Penguins doing pre and post game show, and he took over doing Steelers radio this past season. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rob King. Rob, good afternoon. Thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
Good afternoon, Austin. Glad to be here with you.
Absolutely. So I just want to kind of talk about what you did this past year. You took over from the legendary Bill Hillgrove doing Steelers radio. He actually was just on the podcast not so long ago. What was that like? What was the transition like doing Steelers radio?
Oh, it's a good question. It was interesting for sure. I'd done play-by-play before, and I'd actually filled in for Bill I did 4 games for him a couple of years ago, and 2 at the end of one year, and the next 2 at the beginning of the next year. So I'd done it before, and I've done a lot of play-by-play before, but this was the first time it was a new job and a new position. So it was a little bit different feeling than when I'd filled in before, because you're just trying to keep the seat warm for Bill Hillgrove. That's all you're trying to do. And frankly, I think Bill would probably, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he might feel the same way. I was reading Jim Rooney's book about his dad, Dan Rooney, and he said, Mike Tomlin talks in the audio portion of that book about just being a shepherd for the head coaching job for the Steelers, basically. Like, you're here for a while. The Steelers organization, hires very good people. So if you replace Bill Cowher, you have big shoes to fill. If Bill Cowher replaces Chuck Noll, he's got big shoes to fill. So you just have to think about it as you're the next person in the long line of hopefully successful people at what you do. So I don't feel like I've taken over for Bill Hillgrove. I'm the next guy, and then there'll be a next guy or woman after me. So in that way, it's humbling to be part of the Steelers organization, and it was a joy to do the games. I mean, I just had a blast, Austin. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. No, I could definitely hear you having a lot of fun on those broadcasts this past year. You did a great job. Kudos to you. On your way into doing the games this year, Bill Hillgrove, like you just mentioned, was the original play-by-play guy. Did he give you any advice or any pointers before you started the season?
No, we had a conversation. I reached out to him because, anytime you have an opportunity and know a person like Bill, and Bill's a great guy, as you know, from having him on your podcast. I asked him if there's anything I should be aware of or anything that I should know, and he basically said, no, just fire away, and so that was good to hear from him. He is. I will tell you this. And he's not retired yet. If he retires, I'd love to have his voice. I hope he leaves his voice behind for me, because that's just a rich, beautiful voice to listen to. And I know he's doing pit broadcasts and doing a bang up job with Curtis Aiken and Pat Bostic. And I think the governor was on with him a couple of days ago as well. So no, we had a conversation, but there wasn't much more than just a conversation. And I was grateful for that.
Taking a look back at this past season, you got year one down, year two is ahead. What are you looking at going into next year? Is there anything you personally would like to work on, or is there anything that you're looking forward to specifically next year?
I think anytime you put on a microphone, get behind a microphone, do whatever your profession is, and that's my profession, obviously, you're trying to get better. I've been doing Pirates pregame and postgame for this will be 25 years, I think, this year, and I still think I can get better. I want to get better. So that's what motivates me. And when you work with a great crew, and the crew that I've worked with at was Fox Sports Net and then FSN Pittsburgh, and we've been owned by various iterations. That is just a phenomenal crew, and you're surrounded by really talented and really good people, and so you just want to hold up your end of the bargain. And I feel the same way with the Steelers, from the radio folks to the producers, to the people that you hear on the air: Craig Wolfley, Max Starks, Missy Matthews, all team players, all really good people. And so you want to do your part and get better, and be part of a top-notch broadcast. So that's what I'm looking to do, whether it's with the Pirates or with the Steelers. But certainly for the Steelers, 1 year, that's great. Now, how can I get better and bring a better broadcast to people?
Absolutely. I want to rewind for a second. Looking back on your career, you went to Cooperstown High School in New York. That's where you grew up in Cooperstown. And then you went to the Washington University, excuse me,
Right.
in St. Louis. Where did this broadcasting journal begin? Because correct me if I'm wrong, you actually have a major in English literature.
Yeah.
Where did the
I know
broadcasting come
exactly.
in?
I know exactly where it began. It's funny because people can ask me about things, and I'm like, I don't really remember that. My wife remembers everything. I remember like next to nothing half the time. But I was pumping gas at a Amoco gas station, Lindell Boulevard in St. Louis, and I was with my best friend Brent Pope, and Brent and I were talking, and I was already going to be graduating at a little bit older age than the rest of my classmates. I'd taken my GREs. I was thinking about taking my LSATs. I was probably headed to business school. I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and which is why I majored in English literature. No, I mean that's not an offense to English literature majors. I finally said, you know what? It took me a while to find. I said I'm just going to major in reading. That's basically the way I looked at it because I love to read. So I really didn't know what I wanted to do, and I took my GREs, and I was offered a grad assistant job later on after I was finished playing Division III football by the new coach Larry Kinbaum. But in the interim, I was talking to Brent, and I was like, I don't know what I want to do. I don't want to get myself saddled with more student debt and all this other stuff. And he said, "Man, you should do something in sports broadcasting. All you ever do and think about revolves around sports. I mean, if I wasn't playing sports, I was watching it on TV. I love to play all sports." And it just rang true. And so I followed it up after that. I took a class at a junior college while I was finishing up my independent study on the correspondence between Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, a scintillating topic. I took a class at a junior college and got some experience, and I got an internship. And then that was it. That's how I started on the path. But it was an exact moment in my life. Talking with my buddy Brent while I was pumping gas, him saying, I think this is something you should pursue. So always grateful to Brent Pope for that.
Absolutely. What a great story that is. So, transitioning now from growing up, getting into the sports broadcasting field, what brought you here to Pittsburgh? Why Pittsburgh?
Oh, okay. So that's another circuitous route. I'd worked in upstate New York and St. Louis, and this job, if people remember, and this was before you were born, Austin. My goodness, I'm getting old. So in 2000, Fox Sports launched. They had gobbled up a lot of regional rights to broadcasting teams. It used to be, when you were working in TV and you had to courtesy a station, you memorized them. Like games down in North Carolina were by Jefferson Pilot. Of course, we knew the games that were broadcast by TBS or WGN, but you needed to know every station around the country or figure out, okay, who's carrying this game, because they were all separate entities. Well, Fox Sports started buying up these separate entities that carried local games. So they decided to build a network really around that in an effort to, I think, probably challenge ESPN. I think that was the goal. So they bought the rights to the Cardinals and Blues games in St. Louis, the rights to the Pirates and Penguins games in Pittsburgh, and decided they were going to launch this network before they even had the studios built. So because of the hour time difference, St. Louis and Pittsburgh, they said, okay, well, we can do the games we can do the shows out of the Pittsburgh studio. Of course, there were a lot of overlaps because the Pirates and Cardinals play in the same division. There are times in which what do you do when the Penguins are playing the Blues, for example, or the Penguins are playing in the same time zone as the Blues? So there was a lot of complications. But so I was hired here to do St. Louis sports, and I love St. Louis. I went to school there, and I still know a lot of people there. I think it's a great city. But I was here for about 2 or 3 months, maybe not even that long, really. I looked at my wife and said, "Man, I love Pittsburgh. If there's any chance we could stay here, I would really be open to that." And so what happened was the building of the studio, which was supposed to take place 12 to 18 months after my family and I moved down here, dragged on. Then 9/11 happened, all kinds of stuff happened. There's usually delays in these sort of things anyway. So after 5 or 6 years had passed, I slowly started morphing to doing more and more Pittsburgh stuff and less St. Louis stuff. And so when they finally divested of the St. Louis part and moved everything out to St. Louis, I was really entrenched then as a Pittsburgh guy. So I stayed here. I came here to do St. Louis stuff and stayed here to do Pittsburgh stuff.
That's awesome. That's a great story. So you just said you covered the Cardinals, you covered the Pirates, and then obviously you did the Steelers this past season as well. What is a day in the of Rob King right before a broadcast or right before a show? What I guess is your day-to-day routine? When do you get up? How do you prepare yourself?
Well, they're very different because the Steelers game is a culmination of a week's worth of work, you know. So it's really a week building in, whereas baseball is pretty much get up and do it again. You've done the work from the night before, and so now in the morning, generally either after the show or in the morning, or usually both, I'll communicate with the people that I'm broadcasting. For example, in the Pirates, so that would be Stephen Brault, usually, and Michael McHenry. There are other guys. Matt Capps comes in, Kevin Young comes in, other guys come in, but communicate with them after the show and the producer. Keep open the lines of communication, check back in the morning, make sure my phone is handy in case something happens, and then start writing my scripts. And I write everything, even though we're an ad-lib show, we don't have any teleprompter. I write everything out. I think it's a good way to remember things. And then if it's a home game, over to PNC Park, hear what Derek Shelton has to say, maybe talk to some players or coaches or what have you. Back over, finish up the writing, get on the air and go. And then post game is a reaction to what just happened, and then tomorrow it's the same thing as today. The Steelers is a little bit different because you're keeping an eye on all the different press conferences and getting down to practice. So I try to get down to practice at least once a week. Wednesday is spent entirely watching, for me, the other team's games. So if the Washington Commanders have played 10 games, I put on the NFL Network. I sit in my chair and I watch all 10 games. And I don't like watching that till I've got it memorized, because I use that as sort of a memorization process. And I won't watch all 10 games, but I'll watch them. I'll start on Wednesday, and I'd like to have the team mostly memorized. So, once I'm done with a game on Sunday, I'm on the team plane looking forward to the next opponent, or I come home and start memorizing the next rosters, and that memorization process continues through Monday and Tuesday. Start watching games on Wednesday. Go to practice usually on Thursday. Again, making sure I'm reading, Teresa Varley and Dale Lally and all the people on Steelers.com and all the different newspapers, and making sure I'm staying up on all the stories. But mostly it's memorizing. It's talking to the producer. Talk to Craig Wolfley. What do you want to talk about in the open? Okay. Max Starks, what do you want to talk about in the open? Missy Matthews, what do you want to talk about in the open? What are the big storylines we're all looking at? So I try to communicate with each of the on-air people as well, and then go have fun.
That's great. That's great. A lot of listeners of Two Jagoffs are also fellow Point Park students of mine, and I'm a sports comm major where I'm looking to get into a career similar to yours. I actually do play-by-play myself. Just did Carlo versus LaRoche a couple nights ago, men's basketball. For the people that's listening to this episode out there, or for any aspiring broadcaster, what advice would you give them at that young age?
Well, I think there's a few things I would say. First of all, and these are non-negotiable. You have to put in the work, and I think showing up is important. So if you're doing an event, maybe, and I've done play-by-play of, I mean, if you name a sport, I've probably done play-by-play. That includes field hockey, soccer, volleyball, boxing, polo. I did play-by-play with polo. I had to learn what an offside neck shot was and all that other stuff. When you're going galloping around.
Did you do professional wrestling by any chance?
I've never done professional wrestling. No, I haven't done that. Well, again, sport, not sport. And I don't think I've ever actually done wrestling either. That's one of the few Olympic sports I don't think I've done. And I haven't done diving or swimming, but I've done a lot of play-by-play. And,
yeah.
When you're doing it, it is, everything you do is important. So you need to show up, you need to do the work. You can look at it many different ways. I look at it as, this job is the most important thing that I want to do. And that was I figured if I had that approach, then eventually I'd get better and hopefully I could find a job. Some people look at it as, hey, I want to put something on tape. Okay, that's fine too. However you look at it, the end result has to be the same. You have to work hard. You have to show up. There's no substitute for hard work. So if you're not going to work hard, forget it. Forget, the business isn't for you. So you have to work hard. You have to understand that, Labor Day, Memorial Day, 4th of July, these are rumors, they're holidays for other people, but not for you, which is fine too. I'm not complaining. I'm just letting you know this is how it is. And then I think, one of the other things is, you have to find your own voice. I was an adjunct professor at Syracuse. I've spoken to classes over the years at Pitt, at Point Park as well, and high schools. You have to be yourself, and you have to find a version of yourself that is hopefully entertaining, because there's a version of me that's like, hey, honey, while you're up, can you grab me something out of the fridge? Well, that's me too. But I mean, I can't be like that on the air. So, but you can't. I believe you can't be a phony. I believe you have to be who you are, and I think that what people see on the air is that's basically me. That's basically who I am. So find that. Don't be imitative. Certainly, what you hear and what you're around is going to creep into what you do. There's that's inevitable, and so you're going to be influenced by people around you. But I think you have to find your own voice. So those are some of the starting points for me. Be prepared to work hard. It's non-negotiable. You have to work hard, and you have to, I think, find your own voice. Find who you are that sets you apart from everybody else.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to a conversation we actually had last year. I don't know if you remember this or not. You were one of the special guest speakers in Roger Lenhart's sports
The great
broadcasting
Roger
class.
Lenhart, my
We,
man.
we love Roger Lenhart. Shout out to him. And I remember day one, you were actually the first guest speaker he brought in that year. And you said you have to be your true, authentic self. And if you want to celebrate holidays, this is not the job for you. You're going to miss birthdays. You're going to miss Christmas. And I saw so many people in that class. This is no disrespect to any of my fellow peers, but you could kind of see their attitude change as soon as you said that, because that's a risk you have to be willing to take if you want to get into this career. And personally, as someone who's looking forward to this, I'm all for that and I'm locked in. So that was great advice. I really appreciate that. I just wanted to add that on.
Yeah, and I'm glad. And look, that's the way a lot of the world is for a lot of different jobs. Every job's got something that you like or you don't like. That's just the way it is. And so, what are the worst parts, and can you live with the worst parts? And I remember doing high school football for all those years. I'd be taking my kids to Kennywood when they were little, and I'd have a roster crammed in my pocket, and in between rides, I'd be looking down and memorizing the North Allegheny and Pine Richland rosters, or whoever the football game was that week. But I was trying to be present too at the same time, because you're away from a lot of the time. But with all that, having been said, I would not change my job for anything. I've got a very supportive family. I got a great wife. She understands. She's known from the get-go that there's going to be things that I miss. I can't make it to every family reunion. I can't make it to most family reunions. But I have a job that I absolutely love, always have. I was talking to a friend of mine whose son is still holding on to his professional hockey dream. He's in the minors and he's 30 years old, and he doesn't want to let go of the dream. And at some point, I suppose everybody, if you don't make it to where you want to go, you maybe have to either shift careers, or you have to be content with doing a job and maybe a market you didn't expect to be in. Whatever it is, I wouldn't change my journey for anything. I've absolutely loved it. When you got a job you love, you're not even working.
Yep.
The memorizing rosters. I love that part of the job. I love every part of the job. So, it's got to be, you got to be passionate about it. And I think when you are, those things find their way into your life. Much like if you're passionate about being a bodybuilder, right? Okay, you learn that you can't eat sweets or whatever. Some people might say, "Oh my God, I can't eat ice cream." Well, that's just the way it goes. That's the price you pay for doing whatever it is that you want to do.
Absolutely no, and I wouldn't ask for anything differently, because I've been traveling so much recently, trying to build my professional portfolio, post stuff to LinkedIn, Facebook, try and get my voice out there, network with people, talking with folks like yourself. So I appreciate that advice, and I bet so many people out there are definitely going to take that to heart as well. I want to transition and talk about some sports now for a second. We talked about the Steelers, we talked about the Pirates. You're a busy guy. You're also an author, from what I'm hearing. The Door in the
Yeah.
Stone. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I've got a runny nose here. I'm in my back dusty room here doing the podcast. Yeah, this is my book right here. It's called The Door in the Stone. You see it right there?
I see
My
it.
daughter actually did the illustrations. Very talented artist, a student at University of Edinburgh over in Scotland. But really, really talented artist, and did all the artwork. As I mentioned, I was an English literature major, and I stopped and started writing stuff over the years. I could never really quite find the traction. People had advised me over the years, hey, I think you'd be a good writer. And I tried different genres, and a friend of mine finally suggested, what, you should be writing for kids. He didn't know that I'd been trying other things, and when I sat down to write, I couldn't stop, and so it's been a joyful product, or joyful adventure again. You just much like we're talking about with broadcasting, whether this becomes a great success or not. I mean, if a handful of kids read this and feel the way that I did about the books that really transformed the way I read. And those are when I was a middle grade student reading fantasy books. Really, that's where it started, And it's very similar to people my age. Books by Lloyd Alexander. He had the Prydain Chronicles, the Narnia Chronicles, Ursula K. Le Guin. She wrote the Earthsea trilogy. All these fantasy books, they really turned me into a reader. And I'd always been a reader before, but they made me more curious and want to read different things. And so that's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that kids and by the way, I think that it's written for all ages. So mostly grown-ups have read it. I've had very good reviews on the book and all that. So college kids, Austin,
Yep.
middle grade kids, parents. I think hopefully people will enjoy it. And it's just been again a ton of fun. And we talk about the work that it takes to do things. I mean, this has been 9 years, and in the making on this. The second one's written, and it should be out in the fall. But it's written with the idea that it's something that I'm passionate about, and whether it's a quote unquote success or not. I mean, I'm just happy. I'll be really happy if some kids read it and or people read it and really enjoy it. And that's been the feedback so far. So anyway, thank you. Yes, that's been a blast.
Absolutely. And where can folks find that book at if they want to get their hands on it?
So it's on Amazon right now, but it's also been picked up. If people live here in Pittsburgh, it's soon going to be at Riverstone Books. It's not quite there yet. Next day or two, it'll be at Riverstone Books, City Books downtown, State Gold Bookstore in Regent Square. I've just sort of started the process of getting this thing placed. We'll get it. We'll see if we can get it at the Point Park Bookstore to make it easier for the students. Hopefully, we can get that done. But yeah, there's some places locally, or you can go to Amazon to buy it as well.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Point Park, pick up the book. Come on, what are you guys doing? All right, let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers for a second. You called it. You were there for every game last year. The season pretty much went the way it's been going the last couple of years. They just made it to the playoffs. Mike Tomlin yet again found another way to have a winning season, and it's a first round exit. What's happening with the Steelers?
Well, it's a great question. So, and I think it's not an easy answer. And I think the answer that I have is certainly not one that a lot of fans are going to want to hear. So, 2 years ago when the Steelers made it into the playoffs and played Buffalo, it didn't really feel to me like they had an unbelievable chance of winning that game. Like it felt like a lot of stuff had to go right for them to win. They'd have to win the turnover battle, and maybe they have to return a punt for a touchdown. Maybe somebody on Buffalo would have to slip and fall or whatever. I didn't feel that way about this team. I feel like the gap was a lot closer. I went back even after that 4-game losing streak to end the regular season. When you think about those games, Philadelphia won the Super Bowl. Well, deep in the third quarter, the Steelers are marching, trying to tie the game. There's an unfortunate fumble, and then the Eagles put the game away. Kansas City wasn't that close, but I mean, Jalen Warren, if his touchdown isn't called back on a dubious holding call, the Steelers might have the lead going into halftime. So, and the first Ravens game was the same way. It was a Murphy's Law kind of game. Everything that could possibly go wrong for the Steelers went wrong. Every fumble was recovered by Baltimore. I went back and looked at that game before in preparation of the playoff game. And I remember stepping into the booth thinking, I think the Steelers might win this game. The line was huge, and the Steelers-Ravens is always close. I was shocked by what I saw that night in Baltimore. I didn't see that coming at all. So I think the Steelers, and that was not a close game. That was the one game down the stretch that was not a close game. But I really felt like those 4 games prior to that against top-notch teams. Remember, the Eagles, the Chiefs, the Ravens, the Bengals, who were obviously hot as the season wore on, those are good teams. And the Steelers, would have felt better if they'd won that game against Cincinnati. I don't know what that would have done for their psyche, but I feel like the gap is closed. And because I've gone from thinking, boy, what needs to go right to win this game to, hey, I think the Steelers, I think this is going to be a good game today. So, they need they've had two very productive drafts, even saying that four of their draft picks last year didn't even play because of injury. So that should help bolster the roster. They've got a lot of salary cap money. I'm going to be heading to the combines on Monday to check out the action there. I'll be there for the week, broadcasting on the Steelers Radio Network and DVE. So it's I don't think they're as far away as people think. Now, obviously, you have to get the quarterback situation settled. It's the most important position in all of sports. They have to get that settled. But I also think that they're not as far away as people think. Shore up the D line, perhaps. You're going to need to figure out running back. You have to add a wide receiver. And look, we can go down the list. Well, you need a corner. Okay, great. Every team needs something, right?
Yes,
There's
they
not a
do.
team out there saying, we don't need any help at all. Let's run it back. So, I think that the Steelers are closer than, and I know fans don't want to hear that because it was a similar record with a similar finish than in years past. But I think the Steelers are closer than some fans might think they are.
Of course, not only do they have a lot of salary cap money, they also have a lot of free agents this year. So it's going to be interesting to see how many
Yeah.
they can bring back. Talking about the Steelers quarterback situation, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields were the guy this year, mainly Russell Wilson. Fields started several games early on in the season. Wilson then take over for the rest. Do you have, I guess, out of the two, is there one that you believe Pittsburgh should rock with, or do you think they should look out in the market for someone else?
Well, I mean, you have to figure out who's out in the market, and Art Rooney said, "Look, I think we're going to sign one of these guys and move forward with them." So, you can see it from both ends. I mean, on the one hand, Russell Wilson is a guy who's probably headed to Canton. He's probably headed to the Hall of Fame, and was extremely productive until the end of the season. Yeah, you have to figure out what happened there if you're the Steelers. Why did the offense fall so precipitously off a cliff? And in the last game, it was to me, that was the one game in which the defense, I thought, wow, they kind of got run over in that game. But prior to that, a lot of 3-and-outs against Philadelphia, 5 straight possessions to begin the game without a first down. So why is that? How did the offense go from being so productive, from putting up all those points in Cincinnati, for example? And I understand the competition got better, but that can't explain it all. So I think you have to, you have to ascertain why did that happen, and then you think back about Justin Fields. And again, these are internal questions that the Steelers organization has to answer. Do they feel like Justin Fields made the sort of improvement? Remember, he was picked 11th overall in the draft. Did he make the sort of strides that you think can continue to happen and therefore develop into a good, solid starting NFL quarterback? And if you think that he's an awfully tempting guy to want to try to keep around. Yes, you're trying to win now. Yes, Cam Hayward's getting older and TJ Watt. And you have some guys in your roster that are getting older. You also have an extremely young offensive line. And you've got young players dotted around on the defense, although the defense is older than the offense. So I think those are the decisions that they have to make. And then, what's available via trade, what's available via free agency, and then balancing all those things. It's the toughest decision that this organization, I think, probably has to make is who do you go forward with at the quarterback position? Because there is some strength around the rest of the roster, but we all know how important that position is.
Of course, a lot of people said it was the end of the Steelers season when they got eliminated. The first thing I said when I came on this podcast the next week, it's actually just the beginning. It's the beginning of a long offseason, and it's going to be a great offseason. So I'm very excited to see what happens. The other Jagoff, Lucas Kuntz, could not make it today, but he had a question for you regarding the Steelers in the draft. What do you think the Steelers should target first round?
Well, I think, the Steelers always do a really good job of making sure they're not painted into a corner. So they don't have to pick somebody. So many mock drafts have got them, taking a quarterback. Let's use that to address your position or your deficiency there, if that's what you want to call it, or the hole there. Let's call it the hole there. The running back. I've seen, hey, the Steelers are going to pick a running back or a wide receiver. I think that what I haven't seen in any mock drafts that I've seen is defensive line. And,
Yes.
Matt Williamson had a tremendous stat about how when Cam Hayward was on the field, close to 70% of the time, the Steelers' yards per attempt against was 3.7. That's second lowest in the league. When he wasn't on the field, it was second highest in the league. And then just look at what Philadelphia did with their pocket pressure on Mahomes, their ability to stop the run and their ability to get to the passer and not blitz. They didn't blitz once in that Super Bowl. That's incredible. The Steelers would love to have that kind of defense. Steelers didn't blitz a lot this year. And whether that is their preference or whether that is because they were trying to mask other things on their defense or whatever the case may be, they didn't blitz a ton. So I think the Steelers could go into this draft thinking, okay, we're going to plug some holes in free agency, feel good about some positions, but be prepared to draft somebody that's going to be better than, especially in those first couple of rounds, better than somebody we just signed in free agency. So I think they'll try to shore up those holes, but I think they'll go in thinking, D-line could be possible. Let's say, hey, we really want to pick a defensive lineman, and we have 4 guys who we think are first-round capable picks, and those 4 guys are all gone. Well, it doesn't make any sense to draft a defensive lineman there. You wait and draft maybe somebody in the second round. The Steelers have always done a really good job at doing that, which is why they've a part of the reason, also good scouting and good decision making. Part of the reason that they've had such productive drafts over the years because they're not in a have-to situation. So I think it's running back, receiver, defensive line. I don't expect the quarterback really to be there. Is there a corner that you fall in love with? Perhaps. So I think that they'll go in with an open mind, but also free agency happens first. So that could certainly dictate what they'll do.
Absolutely. Like I said before, it's going to be a great offseason. I'm looking forward to it. To end
Me
off
too.
today's episode of Two Jagoffs, I want to ask you a bit of a fun question. We usually do game shows on Sunday where we just kind of have fun. We play different games called Hall of Fame or Nah, or this or that. So I'm just going to ask you a bit of a silly question. I want to get your opinion on it. What is your go-to Pittsburgh restaurant? You've been in the Steel City for a while now, doing the Pirates, doing the Steelers. Is there a go-to place for Rob King?
I think there are 3 that
Oh,
I go to, and again, I work nights, so it's hard for me to get to as many restaurants. Sorry for all the restaurateurs out there, because I love to eat, and you're getting a big eater when I come to your restaurant. But it's kind of like when people we used to say, in the Seinfeld, again, before you were born, Seinfeld was this massive show, and it was on like Thursday night. I don't even know what night it was on. People were like, hey, did you see the new episode of Seinfeld? No, I was working. I can't watch Seinfeld. So it's the same problem with restaurants. I don't get out as much as I want. But Serafino's is a restaurant that I love down in Crafton. Legends on the North Shore, Legends Eatery on the North Shore is a place I absolutely love to go to. And Leo Greta, all Italian places. And that's another place that I love to go to. So it's hard for me to separate those 3. I don't get to any of them as much as I'd like, but if I'm going out, those are the places I like to go to.
is there a go-to menu item that you usually look forward to when you go out to these places?
No, not really. Like I love to eat. My wife and I were in Portugal last summer, and I'm not really that big of a seafood guy. We have a great restaurant up here in the north where I live called Off the Hook. They do a great job, but I don't. It's not usually. I don't. When I think about going out, I don't usually think about fish. I should more often because Off the Hook is great. But I was in Portugal, and last summer, that's when the Steelers actually called me and offered me the job. It was kind of fun. And I don't think I ate anything but seafood and pastel
Wow.
donatas. These little snacks they have oh my goodness, they're so good in the morning. Little
What's up?
caramel. Oh, they're so good. But so I ate nothing but seafood for 10 days and absolutely loved it. So I like all food. So there's nothing that I think, boy, I've absolutely got to have a hamburger. I've got to have a steak, or I have to have chicken parmesan. Frankly, I like it all.
That's awesome. I'm a bit of a food connoisseur myself, so I just wanted to get your expertise on what you like to get here in the Steel City. Rob, it has been an absolute honor to be able to chat with you for the last half hour or so. Was there any final words that you wanted to leave off with the listeners of Two Jagoffs today?
Go get them. Keep up the good work, and thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, Rob. It was an honor as always. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Two Jagoffs. New episode with Lucas and my dad will come out this Thursday. We'll see you then. Peace.